Our target is to subtract like terms. Terms are these pieces separated by pluses or minus signs, and we are going to be subtracting them, putting together the ones that are like x's go with x's, y's go with y's, and so on. However, in order to subtract, we are actually going to do something different. We are going to add the opposite, or the additive inverse. On this first one, we have 9x minus 3x. We're going to keep the 9x, we're going to change it to an adding problem, and we're going to do the opposite of 3x, which is negative 3x. 9x and a negative 3x are like terms because they both have an x, and the signs are different, a positive 9, a negative 3. So we are going to subtract getting 6. We're going to keep the sign that is larger, which is our 9 is the larger digit, and that's positive, so we're going to keep that. And we're also going to have our x on there as well. Next one, 2x minus 7x. We keep that first number as 2x, but we're going to change this to an adding problem, and we're going to add the opposite of 7x, which is negative 7x. The signs are different again. We have a positive 2 and a negative 7. We are going to subtract getting 5 x's, and then we're going to keep the sign on the larger digit here. So the 7 is larger. I'm going to keep that negative. 17x minus x, I'm going to keep the 17x. I'm going to change it to an adding problem, and I'm going to do the opposite of x, which would be negative x. I'm also going to put a coefficient on there. If I see an x, I know there's 1 there, even though it's not written. So I'm going to write a negative 1x. 17x and a negative 1x signs are different. We are going to subtract getting 16, keep that x on there, and keep the sign of the larger, which was this positive 17 here. Okay, so now this is where we have to pay a little more attention when we have two terms being subtracted to two terms. I'm going to keep both of these first two, the 7x and the 4y. I'm going to change this to an adding problem, and now I need to do the opposite of this whole 3x plus 2y. So the opposite of the first piece, the 3x, would be negative 3x. And then the opposite of this positive 2y would be a negative 2y, which I'm just going to write as a subtracting 2y there. I have multiple items, so I'm going to do my combining like terms. I've got 7x being combined with a negative 3x. Signs are different. Subtract, keep the larger. And then I'm going to put my positive 4y with my negative 2y. Signs are different. Subtract, keep the sign of the larger, and I'm going to use that sign to separate these terms. So since it's positive, I'm going to use that in between the two. On question 5, we're going to keep the 8x and the negative 4y, but we're going to change it to an adding problem. The opposite of 2x is negative 2x. The opposite of adding 9y is subtracting 9y. I can go and get my like terms. The 8x and the negative 2x are going to combine to make 6x's. The negative 4y and the negative 9y are the same sign, so I'm going to add those, getting 13y's, and I'm going to keep that negative sign with them. Number 6, we keep the 13x minus 5. We change it to an adding problem, and we do the opposite of this one. So now the 12x is going to become a negative 12x. But notice we have this subtracting 2. Easiest way to handle this is just to change that subtracting 2 to the opposite, which would be adding 2. Looking for my like terms, the 13x and the negative 12x are going to go together. So they are different signs. Subtract, keep the sign of the larger, getting positive 1x. The negative 5 and the positive 2 are different. So I'm going to subtract, getting 3, keep the sign of the larger, which is negative, and I'm going to use that to separate my terms. On number 7, we're up to 3 terms in each of these parentheses. We're going to follow the same process. Please leave the first 3. And you'll notice I'm dropping the parentheses because they aren't really necessary after we do this adding the opposite method. I'm going to change that subtraction sign to an adding sign. The opposite of 2x is negative 2x. The opposite of subtracting 6y would be adding 6y. And the opposite of adding 10z would be subtracting 10z. I'm going to go through and find my like terms. The 7x and the negative 2x signs are the same. I'm sorry, signs are different. We're going to subtract, keep the sign of the larger. My y's, I have a plus 5y and a plus 6y. Signs are the same, add them and keep that sign. And then lastly, I've got a negative 9z and a negative 10z. Signs are the same, add them together, keeping that z, and keep that sign, so negative. Question 8, we're going to keep the 13m plus the 8n minus 4p. We're going to change this to an adding problem, and we have a negative 2m right here to start, so that's going to switch to a positive 2m. And this says adding a 4p, so I'm going to do the opposite and subtract a 4p. Looking for my like terms, the 13 and the 2 go together to make 15. The 8n doesn't have a partner, so it's not going to disappear, but it's not going to change either. And the negative 4p and the negative 4p will go together to make negative 8p's. Number 9, we keep the 6x plus the 2y minus 11. We change it to an adding problem. We do the opposite of 14, which is negative 14. We do the opposite of adding 5y, which is subtracting 5y. And the opposite of subtracting 2x, which is adding 2x. Looking for my like terms, which are not in a regular order this time. The 6x and the 2x make 8x. The 2y goes with the negative 5y. Signs are different. Subtract and keep the sign of the larger. And then lastly, my constants, the negative 11 and the negative 14 will add together, making 25, and then keep that sign getting negative. Finally, on number 10, we have 20x plus a negative 5y minus a 7z. But we're going to change this to an adding problem. We're going to do the opposite of the next three. So 20x becomes negative 20x. The 5y becomes negative 5y. And the negative 5z becomes positive 5z. Putting my like terms together, 20x combines with negative 20x to make nothing. So I do not want to write an x, because if I write the letter x, I'm saying that there's one of them there. I want to say there's none. The negative 5y and the negative 5y also look like it cancels out, but they don't because they're both negatives. We are going to add those and keep that sign. And then lastly, the negative 7z and the positive 5z, signs are different. Subtract, keeping the z, and keep the sign of the larger.